We can do whatever we want. We could extend it. We could make it shorter. I'd like to make it shorter. I'd like to just send letters out to everybody. Congratulations, you're paying 25%.
If Iran...
Are you from Iran?
No, I'm not from Iran. I'm from the UK. But if,
do you regard your NATO ally?
That Iran can enrich uranium to a
Children.
level
No, he likes me. I think he likes me.
Would you
If he doesn't, I'll let you know. I'll come back and I'll let him home.
Absolutely.
Have you had any
It has to be unbelievable.
How
But,
concerned are
you know,
you?
our incredible flyers and our... I call them the shots. These guys are
24-hour stretch in the
unbelievable.
Obama
From
presidency, the
52,000
Supreme Court
feet, they hit the equivalent of a
Of our
refrigerator
foreign
door.
policy
They actually hit it
makers
right in the center, so
to
it's much
deal
smaller
with
than
the
that.
thing that they've
And
started
just
to
bomb
unleash.
after bomb, going deeper, deeper, blowing up. Incredible, incredible thing. I don't know if you heard the general. He was very impressive. Raisin Cane. You know, he's the one that beat ISIS for me. And he did it in a matter of weeks. And I was told it was going to take 4 or 5 years. And when I got this job, I always said, if I get this job, I'm going to put that guy as the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And Dan Kane, and he, when I heard his name was Raisin, his nickname is Raisin Kane. I said, you got to be kidding. So I liked him right from the beginning, but he knocked out ISIS in a time that nobody ever thought possible. And when this attack was completed and so successful, I said, now I know how you knocked out ISIS so quickly. But we have the best people, we have the best equipment in the world. You know, I rebuilt the military during my 4 years, during my other term. We have the best equipment in the world. The problem is we gave away, you know, a lot of it, but small, relatively speaking. We gave a lot of it away to Afghanistan. Shouldn't have happened. That just shows how incompetent they were. They gave all that equipment away, billions and billions of dollars worth. Shouldn't have happened, but that was small compared to what we have. Now we have a great military with great people. Okay. Please.
Mr. President, congratulations. A couple of very different questions. One is Rwanda, 1994. As you grew up in New York, we all knew how horrific those attacks were. Congratulations on that treaty. There are talks that perhaps...
That's going to take place today at 3 o'clock in the Oval Office. We're going to have a signing with Rwanda and the Congo.
I have a follow-up.
So I'm a little out of my league in that one because I didn't know too much about it. I knew one thing. They were going at it for many years, and with machetes. It is one of the worst wars that anyone's ever seen. And I just happened to have somebody that was able to get it settled. I mean, just a brilliant person who is very comfortable in that part of the world. It's a very dangerous part of the world. I said, are you uncomfortable there? People are being killed. School children are being raided and killed. And I don't even want to say how, but as viciously as I've ever heard. Are you uncomfortable? No, that's the part of the world that I know. Very comfortable. Was able to get them together and sell it. And not only that, we're getting for the United States a lot of the mineral rights from the Congo as part of it. They're so honored to be here. They never thought they'd be coming to. Look, this is a very tough part of the world. They never thought, they were just telling me, they never thought they'd ever be coming to the White House, and they're so honored. And so we're going to give them a great big reception. But that's after many years of fighting. It's a great thing. That's at 3 o'clock, I believe.
Sir, are you concerned at all about secret nuclear sites in Iran? You talked about maybe just
Secret nuclear site?
Yes, that there might be some of those
Not
down the
really.
radar.
Can I tell you? They're exhausted. And Israel's exhausted too. And I dealt with both of them. And they both wanted it settled, both of them. And we did a great job, but they're exhausted. The last thing they're thinking about right now is nuclear. You know what they're thinking of? They're thinking about tomorrow, trying to live. It's such a mess. It's such a mess. The place was bombed to hell. And no, I'm not worried about it at all. And I'm putting out a little statement. I'm going to respond to the Ayatollah's statement yesterday that we won the war. Oh, God, we won the war. And I said, look, you're a man of great faith, a man who's highly respected in this country. You have to tell the truth. You got beat to hell. And Israel was beat up too. They were both beat up. And it was a great time to end it. It was quick. They got the hate out. There was a lot of hate. It would be great if they didn't have that hate. But the last thing they're thinking about is nuclear weapons right now. Please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Iris Howe with NTD Research Media with the Epoch Times. Thank you so much for doing this. It's very refreshing for all of us here
It's a good
in
group.
this room.
So
It's
for-
refreshing.
Very refreshing. Yes, we have to have
Probably.
this, and
I understand what you mean.
So thank you so much for coming out here.
Other than Caroline's done a great job.
Yes.
You're referring to the past administration,
Yes,
not to
yes.
Caroline, right?
Yes. Back to the ruling today, if you don't mind. So you have always talked about winning for the American people.
Right.
How do you think today's ruling will enable you to further deliver for American families and workers across the country, not only when it comes to immigration, but also when it comes to trade, energy? What actions are you most eager to move forward
Well, I
with
think
now?
taking power away from these absolutely crazy radical left judges is a tremendous, this is such a big day. This is such a big day. It's like, it's sort of sad because we're doing the signing at 3 o'clock, and this may very well dominate the signing of a big war that was going on and really affecting the continent of, think of it, the entire continent of Africa was being affected. And we're settling that war today, and this will probably be a headline. But this is a very big moment, and it gives power back to people that should have it, including Congress, including the presidency. And it only takes bad power away from judges. It really doesn't take power. It takes bad power, sick power, and unfair power. And it's really going to be, this is a very monumental decision. Yeah, please.
Yes, President, thank you very much. On July 9th, is that July 9th date set for tariffs to snap
No.
back, or could there be a?
We can do whatever we want. We could extend it. We could make it shorter. I'd like to make it shorter. I'd like to just send letters out to everybody. Congratulations, you're paying 25%. He doesn't want. He's a much nicer person than I am. Go ahead. Do you finish it up?
Who are you considering for the Federal Reserve then? And are you speeding up that process? I see Secretary.
Oh, he's terrible. He's terrible. I mean, I have a list of things. We're like 38 on the list. We pay, Cameroon and different places are paying the same as us. Because, you have somebody sets a rate at 4% or 4.5%. It's hard to go out and say we should be paying 1% when you have your so-called experts doing it. And the sad part is, as per the question that you asked about tariffs, we've had the tariffs and we have less inflation than we had before. What we have is a hell of a lot more money, a hell of a lot more income, and we shouldn't be paying a rate like that. In other words, when we pay a rate, I'll tell you, each point is the equivalent of $300 billion. So if we had it down 3 points, because I think we should be at 1, you have Switzerland is at 0.25, in other words, 25% of 1%. And they're the number 1 right now, but we should be the number 1. And soon you're going to have, I think, you're going to have where the people will pay will pay, like we had a few years ago, where you put up money, you loan money, and I mean, you actually, instead of paying, you get paid. I love that. I don't know if it's any good, but I love it, where you put up money and you get paid. But we should be in a category, so we should be at the top of the list, not toward the bottom of the list. But we have a man who's not a smart man, and he probably has Trump derangement syndrome. And he's just not a smart person. What he's doing, though, he's hurting us for years to come. Because if we borrow money at 2 points higher than we should be paying, that's $600 billion. Wouldn't you say those numbers are about right, Scott? So it's 2 points would be about 600, actually more than that, but about $600 billion, all because the guy doesn't want to lower the rates. He is doing the service, a very disservice, and then he goes up and talks about, I'd like to see costs come down. He gets up and he does his little thing for 5 minutes, and he goes out and he goes back to the beach. He goes, I'd like to see costs come down. Well, he could lower the interest cost by $900 billion a year. All he has to do is lower rates. And everybody's saying, I was watching some of the business shows today, and they're saying, Trump's right. He should really be cutting. The country's doing well. We have no inflation. Now, despite him, we're doing great. But if we got the rates down, we would be a rocket ship. So I think that'll be it. And I just want to thank everybody. This is a really big day. We've had a big week. We've had a big week. We've had a lot of victories this week. NATO was a tremendous victory. The war was a tremendous. Look, we were talking about this for 30 years, about Iran being nuclear. And all I said is it will not be nuclear, and it's not going to be nuclear. And, I want to give credit to a lot of people, and most importantly to our great military. Boy, they put out that fire. Once that happened, once those bombs got dropped, that war was over. That war was over. But I just want to compliment them. Incredible. The general and all of his generals. Pete Hegseth was great. They all. And now I want to compliment Pam. A lot of genius went into this. You know, people, if you don't say it exactly right, if the Supreme Court doesn't get it because it's incorrectly spoken about, and that happens. A lot of cases are lost because they don't say the right words. But I want to correct. She's going to go down as a great attorney general. I may change my mind about that. I don't know. Maybe someday I'll have call and say I was only kidding. She's going to go down as a great attorney general. This was a tremendous win, and we've had tremendous wins, but this was a tremendous win today. So I just want to congratulate you and Todd and your whole staff. Very brilliant people, and we can't forget John Sauer.
That's right.
Who is with. There's a medical emergency within his family, so he's taking care of that, and we said absolutely. So I just want to thank everybody very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
President just leaving the White House briefing room. Welcome to Inside Politics. I'm Jim Sciutto in today for Dana Bash, and we are following the breaking news, significant news. President Trump just addressed a monumental Supreme Court decision poised to redefine executive power in this country. He personally thanked the justices who ruled in his favor, the 6-3 decision sending shockwaves across the country as it limits lower courts' ability to block president's executive orders by using a nationwide injunction. This case specifically revolved around whether President Trump could enforce his ban on birthright citizenship. And the decision now clears a path for him to move forward with that, at least for now, even though the vast majority of constitutional scholars say it is unconstitutional. CNN's Kristen Holmes is at the White House. Kristen, you're listening to the president there, clearly taking a victory lap, not just on the Supreme Court decision, given he has so many executive orders that had currently been blocked by injunctions such as this, but Iran, his big, beautiful bill, you name it.
Right, everything. I do want to point to a couple of things because I think the most notable came in the form of him listing off the executive orders that have been stopped by a nationwide injunction. And he said, thanks to this decision, we can now probably file to proceed with these numerous policies for those who have been wrongly, he says wrongly, enjoyed on a nationwide basis. He includes birthright citizenship, ending sanctuary city funding, suspending refugee settlement, freezing unnecessary funding, stopping federal taxpayers from paying for transgender surgery, and a number of other priorities. He said he had a whole list there. This is really the crucial part of this ruling. It does expand the executive, and it expands the executive under President Trump. They believe that now they have more of an opportunity to move forward with executive orders without the threat of having them stopped or paused by a lower court ruling. This limit of power is not going to just apply, as he said, to birthright citizenship, but to a much larger selection of issues that President Trump is going to try to push through using these executive orders, particularly now that this ruling has come down in the Supreme Court. Now, the other part of this that I thought was fascinating, you mentioned briefly, was him thanking the Supreme Court justices over and over again and thanking them by name. I'll just remind you, a couple months ago, we reported that President Trump had been critical privately about his Supreme Court justice that he appointed, Amy Coney Barrett. Here, he said that she was brilliant, that her writing was brilliant on this ruling when she was asked about it. Clearly, he is very happy with the ruling here, but we don't generally hear presidents coming out and thanking the Supreme Court for their decisions, and that was probably another really notable moment here.
Listen, Ed, brilliant when they agree with him. We've seen this pattern. Kristen Holmes at the White House, thanks so much. I'm joined now by a terrific group of reporters and analysts. CNN's Joan Biskupic, Jeff Mason of Reuters, Sungmin Kim of the AP, and CNN senior legal analyst Ellie Honig. I want to begin with you, and I have a lot to get through with our constitutional experts here. But on the birthright citizenship piece of this, does this effectively allow him now to block birthright citizenship, which, as we said, constitutional scholars say the language is quite clear on in some parts of the country, at least for a period of time?
In theory only, because first of all, this whole thing's on hold for at least 30 days. That was already written into the executive order, and essentially the court reminded people of that. Right now, as we speak, Jim, people are going to lower courts right now, trying to use alternative methods, trying to look for class action ability to sort of block it. But what the court has given him two major things here. First, at least an invitation to try to end birthright citizenship. And the other, as Kristen just mentioned, an invitation for a whole swath of policies that are arguably unlawful. I was in the courtroom when Justice Barrett read this. And first of all, I just have to say, it was a very big surprise that she authored this, only because the whole world up there works on seniority. And Chief Justice John Roberts had the authority to decide who would write this. And look who he gave it to, the most junior member of that 6-justice majority. Gave it to her, first of all, in part because she does tend to be, compared to her colleagues, not compared to the left for sure, a little more measured. And in fact, several of the other conservatives split off and wanted it to go further. But the point is that she got to do this, and it's going to give a green light to countless presidential orders that right now had been stopped.
No question. I want to get to that list of orders, but before we do, Ellie Honig, what do those who want to challenge this ruling, who want to protect birthright citizenship, what do plaintiffs do now to attempt to defend that in light of this decision?
Well, they have to either become parties themselves to a lawsuit, right? They can no longer rely on, well, one district judge in some other district blocked this nationwide. If someone wants to challenge this now, they have to either sue on their own or become part of what we call a class action, a large group of people going in and suing at once. It's way more burdensome than it was a few hours ago. And the bottom line takeaway from today is right now, the presidency, forget about Donald Trump, the presidency is far more powerful than it was at 9:55 a.m. this morning. What this says is that district court judges, by and large, cannot individually block a president's orders across the country. And it should be noted, this was a problem. This was a practice that bothered and upset and got in the way of presidential initiatives of Joe Biden, of Barack Obama, of George W. Bush to an extent. But this has now fundamentally shifted the balance of powers away from the courts to the president. And I should say, with the press conference that just adjourned, the president is correct that he got a big win today. But there was some overstatement in there, too. At one point, I think the attorney general said, now district court judges can't stop us from doing anything. Yes, they can. They can on a case-by-case, party-by-party basis. But their power to do that's much reduced.
Listen, there are people watching this decision today whose children were born in this country, and the law as understood, and not just with the 14th Amendment, but for instance, the 1898 decision, Wong Kim Ark, where the expectation was your child's born here, they're a citizen. They have questions now, and they have questions about how they pursue that case if it's taken away from them. I do want to bring in Democratic Congressman Jamie Raskin, ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee. Congressman, your reaction to this? Do you take Ellie Honig's description there as this being a massive expansion of executive power?
Well, it's certainly an expansion of executive power by virtue of the interpretation of the Judiciary Act of 1789, limiting the equitable jurisdiction of each individual court. But I think Donald Trump doesn't understand what's just happened, because 4 different federal courts have struck down his attempts to nullify constitutional birthright citizenship. 2 judges appointed by Republicans, Reagan and Bush, 2 judges appointed by Democrats, Obama and Biden. Their holdings stay within their district courts, but the nationwide implications have now been reduced because of this order, with the court saying that, it's too much of an extrapolation from the power that Congress gave to federal courts in 1789. All right, fine. That means now that people are going to go out and file nationwide class action suits, which are still allowed. You can bring it as a class action, or they'll bring suits across the country. I mean, in a certain sense, the universal jurisdiction that had been extended by these courts saved Donald Trump from a huge, blistering, continuing political defeat, because the whole country is against him on his stupid order trying to nullify the first sentence of the 14th Amendment, which says all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. It's plain as day. And the Supreme Court, the conservative court, trying to soothe his political ego, says, oh, well, we'll give you a procedural win on the equitable power of district courts, but he's going to continue to lose on the substance, and he's going to lose on the substance when it goes up to the Supreme Court. And that's probably one reason They gave it to Amy Coney Barrett to write the procedural mini for the president.
He did make his intention clear to end, at least his intention to end birthright citizenship by claiming, and I'm quoting him here, the 14th Amendment protections of birthright citizenship was meant for just the babies of slaves there. I do want to ask about another case, and that is one that relates to LGBTQ books in schools, because this, of course, was a case brought by parents in Montgomery County, Maryland, state you represent, an area you represent. Can I ask your reaction to this ruling here, which in effect gives parents the right to be to not have their kids see books with things like same-sex couples in them?
Well, as the dissenting opinions point out here, the implications of this decision are just breathtaking because, of course, if you have a religious free exercise right to opt out of a compulsory exercise, for example, what the Supreme Court said in West Virginia versus Barnett, it applies not just to an exercise of religious conscience, but a conscience generally. If there are, Jehovah's Witness kids who don't want to participate in the compulsory flag salute, it also applies to kids who are internationalists or pacifists or what have you. And it's the same thing here. If you can opt out of mandatory classroom readings because it offends your religious objections, you can do it because it offends your philosophical, beliefs, your political beliefs, your moral beliefs, or what have you. And the court basically says, well, we'll deal with all of that down the road. There's going to be a lot more cases where people are saying, our family doesn't believe in evolution, so we don't want our kid to be in class when evolution is taught. It offends our religion. Our family doesn't believe in war, so we don't want our kids in class when World War II is being taught about. And so the courts are going to have to figure that out. And so again, they're trying to flatter a particular political group, a MAGA group here, and I think it's going to cause chaos going forward in terms of trying to figure out what it means to have a public education system.
Well, you could imagine just the remarkable possibility of books schools just taking books off the shelves of their libraries. Just very quickly, because we're near the top of the hour here, classified briefing regarding the results of military strikes on Iran. Can you give us a read as to how far the damage went?
But I cannot give you that read, and I don't think it's totally clear. And I really don't know much more than any of us know from reading the newspaper. For me, the critical point is Congress should not be briefed after the fact. There's a reason that the Constitution reposes the power to declare war exclusively in the Congress. The framers did not trust a president because they'd seen all of these wars of fancy and vanity and profit being waged by kings. They thought it was way too much power to put in one person, and they wanted the representatives of the people deciding. So everything I've learned about this, publicly or otherwise, indicates to me we've got to stick to the Constitution.
Congressman Jamie Raskin, we do appreciate you joining us. We're close to the top of the hour. Jeff and Sungmin, I want to get your thoughts on this. And first, if we could put up on the screen all the Trump administration actions that had been paused by nationwide injunctions, or at least several of them. And this gives you a sense, Jeff Mason, of what this means for him.
Yeah. What comes to my mind is I think he'll be writing a thank you letter to Mitch McConnell, because it all goes back to having the Supreme Court have the members that it does right now that were certainly not expected at the end of the term that preceded the last one.
Sure.
So it's just such a big deal for him to have that much conservative energy on the Supreme Court. And this is a president who came in for his second term really wanting to exercise executive power, and that was strengthened before by the Supreme Court before he came into office, and it's been strengthened again today.
So, the president left a little daylight for what had been his deadline to pass the big, beautiful bill. He'd wanted it by July 4th. He did say there, well, maybe, that'd be nice if we did. Where does that stand now? Is it, especially given the parliamentarians' rulings?
Right. I mean, the reason why he said it's not the end all if they don't make this July 4th deadline is because the bill is in a much messier place than perhaps just a few days ago, because of the Senate parliamentarian who decides, who's kind of the balls and strikes caller of the Senate. She decided there were a lot of provisions of this bill that were not that would basically need 60 votes to pass, not a simple majority. So the Senate's working it out right now. July 4th obviously is a very tight deadline for both the House and Senate to pass their measures of the bill. The real deadline is when the nation reaches the debt limit, because the debt limit increases in that bill that's expected later this summer, and all the tax rate deadlines are effectively the end end of the year. So that's another deadline that they have to be. July 4th was kind of made up. It was more patriotic.
And listen, with those rulings, what they do is they take away a lot of the pay-fors that Republicans had planned for these tax cuts, and the bottom line is going to be a bigger add to the debt. Joan, given there are so many constitutional questions here, we have 2.5 minutes for you to distill them for the world. But one thing that strikes me, how can the court not decide on the merits of birthright citizenship now if the practical effect of this decision is that it might take it away from some people for a time?
Number one, they can do whatever they want.
Yeah.
Number two, Justice Barrett said from the bench, we expect this question to be back here soon. Now, you just heard President Trump's spokesperson say they'll decide it in October. Probably what they'll get is they'll get a case by the fall, and then next year at this time, the five of us will be here again deciding it. But no, part of the test, Jim, real quick, is that for a judge's court order to try to block something is a question about the merits. Is this constitutional or not? And the justices blew past that and said, actually, if any party is going to be harmed here, it would be the president. So we're going to side with the president at this point.
Ellie Honig, I know that Republicans will say the judges are the ones who are imperial by trying to block the president's decisions with these nationwide orders, but this is a very powerful presidency that this court envisions here with this decision. A step closer to an imperial presidency?
Well, for sure. And it's not just Republicans who object to this. It's whoever's in the White House at any given moment. I mean, you go back 2 years, it was Democrats saying that when Biden was in the White House. But for sure, the presidency is so much more powerful than it was just a few hours ago. I said a year ago was the immunity ruling. That, of course, expanded presidential power. But this is a bigger deal. This is systematic, system-wide. And to a point Jeff made earlier, all the big decisions today were 6-3. And Joan knows Chief Justice Roberts really tries to avoid those 6-3s. But when we get down to the big ones, they retreat to their corners.
And as you said, you were surprised by Amy Coney Barrett.
I was surprised they gave it to her. But boy, that says something. That really says something about Amy Coney Barrett as his partner, as his lieutenant. And as Jeff said, it goes back to those 3 Trump appointees from the first administration that he had, and who knows what's going to happen in the next 3 years.
No question. Well, again, big decisions, not just on nationwide injunctions, but as we touched on with Congressman Raskin, on LGBTQ books in schools, or just books that contain any LGBTQ content. Thanks so much to all of you for distilling these important issues in the span of minutes and seconds. And thanks to all of you for joining Inside Politics. I'm Jim Sciutto. CNN News Central starts right now.
The Supreme Court delivering a major win to President Trump, limiting the ability of judges to temporarily block his orders. What this means for his immigration crackdown, the rest of his agenda, and future administrations.
Plus, House lawmakers are speaking out after receiving a classified briefing on the U.S. strikes on Iran, and they're raising questions about the fate of Tehran's supply of enriched uranium, and they are raising those concerns. And later, he's divided the internet over the lengths that he'll take to defy aging. Now the Don't Die guy, Brian Johnson, is meeting with lawmakers in the nation's capital. Why? We asked him. We're following these major developing stories and many more, all coming in right here to CNN News Central.
We start this afternoon with President Donald Trump celebrating a Supreme Court win. The High Court ruling today limiting the power that lower court judges have to block executive orders. In simple terms, less power for these judges, more power for a president.
I'm grateful to the Supreme Court for stepping in and solving this very, very big and complex problem, and they've made it very simple. Thanks to this decision, we can now promptly file to proceed with these numerous policies and those that have been wrongly enjoined on a nationwide basis.
In a fiery dissent, liberal Justice Sonia Sotomayor accusing the majority of shamefully playing along with the Trump administration's gamesmanship. Another scathing dissent from Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson saying the ruling will enable, quote, our collective demise. This is just one of 3 historic rulings today. Let's take you live for reaction to the White House with CNN's Kristen Holmes, who's standing by. Kristen, what more is President Trump saying?
Well, look, this is a really big deal for the White House, Boris. This is something that they have been wanting, but it also greenlights a number of different agenda items. Keep in mind here, President Trump had a long list of things that he has been trying to get done that have been stopped by these nationwide injunctions in the lower courts. He actually rattled some of them off. All of those now are likely to have that pause lifted and move forward. It also gives you a little bit of insight into the fact that President Trump and his team now believe that they have more authority with those executive orders, because essentially what this is doing is making it that the lower courts cannot pause an executive order on a nationwide platform. They can do it in that one case, in that one state, but they can't do it nationwide. And this was something that President Trump's team was really hoping for. I think it might be even better than what they thought the outcome was going to be. Now, in addition to praising the ruling and thanking the justices, he also singled out Justice Amy Coney Barrett, who, as we reported a few months ago, he had been privately bashing, saying that she wasn't living up to what she had promised behind closed doors when she was trying to get that position. And he, of course, had appointed her. Here's what he said.
How about we just do my second?
She has taken some heat, though, from some of your supporters who have labeled her weak, a squishy, a rattled law professor. What is your take on that?
I don't know about that. I just have great respect for her. I always have. And her decision was brilliantly written today, from all accounts.
Brilliantly written? That's brilliantly written. Obviously, that is different than what I heard just a few weeks ago from people who had spoken to him directly about his opinion of Amy Coney Barrett. But there is no denying it that right now the White House is soaring very high, and they are feeling very good about this.
And Kristen, President Trump, as was asked by our own Jeff Zeleny in the briefing room, had a huge week, and he answered questions about Iran as well. The U.S. strikes coming last weekend, and there's still a search for answers when it comes to what Iran's nuclear capacity is right now. And the president was also specifically asked about whether Tehran may have had secret nuclear sites. He seemed confident that they didn't.
He seemed confident that they didn't, but he didn't entirely answer the question. What he said instead was that they are completely exhausted, that the last thing that they're thinking about right now is a nuclear program. Obviously, that's not what we've heard from some of Iran's leaders. We actually heard the supreme leader, the Ayatollah, saying that they won this war. And President Trump addressed that also, saying that he should be truthful, that they lost this war. He also doubled down on the idea that all of these sites were completely obliterated. But one thing I thought was interesting in his talk about Iran is that he was asked specifically if it turns out that Iran had capabilities to enrich uranium to a level that concerned the White House, would President Trump consider bombing them again? And he said absolutely, which is not something we had heard before. One thing to take into effect of all of this is that there is a behind-the-scenes negotiation happening right now between the United States and Iran over this potential nuclear program. There are a lot of conversations happening here, and the president and the administration feel very good going into those negotiations as well. But interesting to hear him say that he would bomb them again, also kind of reiterating that he doesn't believe that there's any nuclear threat from Iran right now.
Kristen Holmes from the White House, thank you so much. Brianna?
All right, let's go right now to our chief Supreme Court analyst, Joan Biskupic, who is here in studio with us. Joan, you were in the courtroom, and this was really an extraordinary time. Tell us about it.
Sure. Justice Barrett read this opinion for the majority. That in itself was so unusual. She's the junior justice of the six conservatives who ruled this way. And I think we have one of her comments that she made from the bench to roll here that you could put up that I think will show just kind of how she laid this out. Maybe not. Okay, they don't. But anyway, she unspools this opinion for 10 minutes, and then Justice Sotomayor comes back for 20 minutes saying how much things will now change in America because of President Trump's or any president's ability to enforce potentially unlawful orders without any check from a lower court. Now, Justice Barrett had said that this is something that the question of birthright citizenship is not really at issue here. It's more the power of lower court judges, and that soon the justices would eventually decide whether what Donald Trump is trying to do by lifting birthright citizenship, whether that's constitutional. But Justice Sotomayor came right back and said, don't be fooled. This is about birthright citizenship right now. That what this could potentially do is for babies born in the near future here of anyone here who's not a citizen or here on a temporary basis could suddenly not have the ability to have birthright citizenship, which has long been for more than 150 years they're in place. So it was quite dramatic. And you know, two things. The reason I was going to highlight Justice Barrett is just because of her role. She's someone who President Donald Trump has criticized recently in private, and he's criticized publicly some of the other conservatives, but they have given him, this conservative majority has given him really a full sweep.
So what is the real effect of this going forward? If this does limit the ability of lower courts to have these injunctions, is there potentially a patchwork of things that could happen throughout the country? What does it look like on different issues?
Yes, exactly, Brianna. You know, lower court judges have stopped Donald Trump from pulling back funding in programs. They've stopped Donald Trump from outright firing, massive layoffs everywhere, RIFs, and just trying to cut back on the Department of Education and other agencies. And lower courts have put a lot of that on hold. Other policy measures that he has tried to enforce, they've put that on hold. So now, those things, the Trump administration now has a very important legal card to play against those, as well as a stronger legal card when he tries to defend on the merits the birthright citizenship move that he's made.
Joan, thank you so much. What a day to be in that courtroom. We really appreciate it. Boris?
With us now is the National Legal Director of the ACLU, Cecilia Wang. Ms. Wang, thanks so much for being with us. A majority of justices found that universal injunctions likely exceed the authority that Congress has given federal courts. They point to a leap in the number of these injunctions over the last few years. How do you respond to that?
So I think, Boris, that the court, or at least a majority of the court, has gone out of its way to opine on so-called universal injunctions in a case where it really wasn't necessary to do that. The petitioners here, including 22 states and numerous nonprofit organizations and individuals who are harmed by President Trump's birthright citizenship order, all proved that in order to get complete relief, in order to get a court order that would adequately protect them as people who might move from state to state, they needed to have an injunction that really covered the whole country. But I'll say this, Boris, there are ways in which this opinion is actually quite limited, and perhaps I think is going to only give President Trump temporary relief. And here's why. The decision today leaves the lower courts injunctions that block President Trump's birthright citizenship executive order in place for now. And it's sending the cases back to the lower courts to give them an opportunity to redecide on the scope of their orders and asks them to justify the scope of their orders. The bottom line is that there are still many open pathways to block President Trump's illegal and unconstitutional birthright citizenship order and ensure that all babies born in the U.S. are equal citizens, as the rule has been in our country since the end of the Civil War. The case that the ACLU has brought with partner organizations will continue. We'll be filing a motion for class certification today. And that's one of the ways in which people who are harmed around the country by President Trump's effort to end birthright citizenship will be able to go and get protection from the courts for this fundamental American right.
So that effort to get a class action certification is something that Justice Kavanaugh pointed to as a possible alternative to get relief from these executive orders. Notably, though, Justice Alito said that judges should avoid doing that to excess, in his view, because it would become a nationwide injunction, essentially by another name. I wonder what you make of that statement from Justice Alito and whether you're concerned about getting that class action certified to be nationwide.
I'm not concerned. I think that we will prevail both in seeking class certification and ultimately on the merits question of whether Trump's effort to end the 14th Amendment's guarantee of birthright citizenship is lawful or not. I'm confident that we will prevail on both fronts. And Justice Barrett's majority opinion for the court points out that class actions remain a different theory for how courts can give plaintiffs who go to the courts seeking protection from illegal government action the protection they need under the Constitution of the United States. I think the broader question that the court's opinion kind of leaves open is that when the federal government is a defendant and the court rules that their policy is unconstitutionally, typically and historically, federal officials will implement those court orders by just stopping their enforcement of the illegal policy, not just as to plaintiffs who won the order. President Trump is a federal official who will see testing those norms of presidential behavior. Luckily, though, the federal rules of civil procedure and precedents of the Supreme Court give people many different options that are still available in order to get those protections for their fundamental rights under the Constitution. So I think the decision today, while troubling, is in the end limited.
Yeah, we'll see what comes next, and we hope to continue the conversation then. Cecilia Wang, thanks so much for sharing your perspective.
Thanks, Boris.